And welcome back on Take Action News with David Shuster. This is executive producer Daniel Marins, and we're moderating a fascinating debate here on Take Action News and discussion between Eliot Spitzer, the former governor of New York and host of The Viewpoint on Current TV, and Robert S. Kaplan, a professor at Harvard Business School, a former Goldman Sachs vice chairman, and the author of the forthcoming book, What You're Really Meant to Do, A Roadmap for Reaching Your Unique Potential, which is coming out in May 2013. You can get it on Amazon and any number of other outlets for buying books. The Office of the Comptroller of Currency recently withdrew a case-by-case review of foreclosure fraud in favor of a $9.3 billion settlement, which would amount to something like $1,000 per fraudulently foreclosed upon homeowner. Professor Kaplan, are we doing enough to provide relief and bring justice to homeowners that were fraudulently foreclosed upon?
The short answer is I'm not sure we are, and I certainly followed with great interest some of the comments made by the Attorney General and others whether you could actually bring charges against a big bank. And my feeling is the same as a lot of other people who've said you've got if there's criminal conduct, you've got to pursue it wherever it is. Nobody is above the law, and I can understand why the government is careful to bring a case against an institution if it's not sure it can be proven. But in those cases where it believes it can be proven, I think they need to bring cases against individuals and, if necessary, institutions. So the short answer is I don't know, and I think as a citizen I'd like to see the laws enforced.
Governor Spitzer.
Well, let me build on that, because I think there's actually more agreement here than I may go a little farther than the professor would. I think that Attorney General Holder's comments seemed to give too much weight to the collateral consequences of bringing the criminal case than is appropriate for law enforcement. And cases should be brought, the remedies imposed can be tailored to mitigate the collateral consequences, but the cases should be brought because there is a critical point from a societal perspective in showing, as the professor just said, as we all have said at one point or another, more or less eloquently, nobody's above the law, and that there are ways to mitigate collateral downside risks to the economy. I would say this with respect to the mortgage crisis. I think it is demonstrative of the part of the prior conversation we were having where much of it, not all of it, and there was loads of responsibility on the part of those who borrowed too much knowing they couldn't afford it. I'm not one who says, gee, don't ignore that. There was significant responsibility on the part of those who issued the debt, primarily because it was all being securitized. And this is a case where debt was issued, it was not being held by the banks, and therefore the risk was being pushed elsewhere. And the failure to absolutely be responsible for the debt issued led to lax standards and much worse. The last point I would make is that when it comes to sanctions being applied, that there is loads of documentation that people were acting improperly, not just the robo-signing, but also foreclosure practices, and just there was a mess within that little subsector of the banking community. I think voice, what made people feel. The professor said the same thing. There has not been prosecutions. There could have been prosecutions. I've seen the evidence, and I think it's just too bad because the public's generalized sense is that, justice hasn't been done, and that's not a good way to leave a crisis.
And in fact, 22% of homes in the country are still underwater, even at this stage in the economic recovery. Professor
Look, can I interrupt, folks? But we got to separate. Look, you can be underwater without there being fraud involved. You're underwater because markets drop precipitously. The real subset we should be worried about is where there were highly improper foreclosure practices, and that's where the criminal cases should be focused.
What about principal reduction for homeowners? Is that on the basis of sort of how they've been dealt with criminally or not, or should that just be based on need?
I'll let Professor go first.
Well, that's a tough one, and I think on this there's not a lot of, and there shouldn't be, I don't think, a lot of debate on all these issues in terms of principal reduction. I think I know what the government has been struggling with, as well as institutions, but mainly the government, is how far to go with principal reduction, because they don't want people who've been paying their mortgage on time at great hardship to feel like, gee, what I should have done is defaulted. You don't want that incentive either. So I think that's why the government's had a hard time just balancing all this.